If it's Sunday, it's Wrestling Night in America here on pwtorchdailycast.com, as well as the PW Torch YouTube page. I am Pro Wrestling Torch columnist Greg Parks, and it is Sunday, June 23rd, 2024. I am joined by pwtorch.com contributor Joel Dehnel to help me preview AEW Forbidden Door. After all, we talk about the big shows in pro wrestling here on Wrestling Night in America, part of the PW Torch Dailycast lineup. Joel, thank you for joining me. I know you were on, I think, with Wade after Dynamite this week,
Mhm.
pulling a little bit of double duty.
Yeah, I was on this week with Wade talking about Dynamite immediately after the show, and then I also did my regular show with Greg Canner that comes out on Fridays, which is the All Elite Conversation Club. But it's been a while, Greg. It's good to see
Mhm.
you on this. I know we're all saying that with the video
Yeah,
chat, but it's a cool new format, and I think it's leading to some really great shows being able to see each other with these conversations.
I've enjoyed it, and I'm not someone who is someone to embrace change. So I was pretty concerned about this, like from the standpoint of my own technological abilities to be able to handle what this encompasses. And I've really enjoyed it. I love getting the immediate feedback in the comments. If you're watching live, certainly comment. If you have any questions as we're running down the Forbidden Door card, we want to hear from you. You can also email us at wnialivecast@gmail.com. That is the email that you can reach us 24/7. So if something happens on Dynamite that you want to ask us about, you can send us an email. Maybe you can't watch live, but you want to follow up on something we said on a previous episode. Send us an email and we'll get to it during the show. Also, keep in mind that next Sunday, since we are talking Forbidden Door this week, next Sunday I will be along with Brandon LeClaire. We will do the AEW Forbidden Door post show right here on the PW Torch YouTube page and pwtorchdailycast.com. So you'll want to join us then. If you watch Forbidden Door, we want to hear your feedback. Obviously, Brandon and I will give our feedback on the show, but we're not the only ones that matter. We want to hear from you. Join us in the chat. If you can't stay up that late, you got to work the next day, send us an email with your thoughts on the show. So really look forward to hearing from people on that as well. Um, you know, before we get into Forbidden Door, Joel, I do want to rant a little bit. I mean, not rant. Um, and I'll preface this by saying I am not someone who is always saying the sky is falling for AEW. I think people who've read my work over the last 15 years, people who've heard me on all the audio shows that I've done during that time, you guys know that I'm pretty even keel, right? I'm certainly not one of those people who believe AEW is going to be dead by Memorial Day. You know, the old stereotype. That being said, I don't ever remember a time where I've been as concerned about AEW than I am now. And I don't mean concern in terms of is the company going to go out of business? I don't think that's too extreme. But, you know, when you have all of these things happening, the low attendance numbers that TV has drawn, you've got the crowd reaction. I watched Collision on Saturday and it was like a morgue in there. I mean, it was scary dead for a company that in its early days was built upon the crowds being into everything. And I know that's hard to sustain over a 3-4 year period, but it's just that dichotomy between the reactions or non-reactions we're seeing now versus what the initial joy was for even having AEW in our lives, and fans were just happy to have an alternative to WWE. So there's that. There's more and more characters that feel like they're not hitting. You know, you can point to
Mhm.
Chris Jericho in the Learning Tree. You can point to Okada, who's being paid millions of dollars to be the Young Bucks sidekick or whatever the case may be. And then you look at the rating for Dynamite, and yes, it was a one-time deal. Yes, there may have been extenuating circumstances on that night, but to draw almost 300,000 less than what you usually draw, I'm sorry. To me, that is cause for concern, even if it's a one-off. There were that many people willing to drop watching your show for whatever else was going on. That's a decision, right? It's opportunity cost. And they decided that the cost of not watching Dynamite was worth it to them. And I'm sure the rating will rebound this Wednesday. I don't think this is going to be the new watermark or anything like that. And it's funny because when you see companies' downfalls in the eras of um, cable television, so over the last 20 to 30 years, their downfalls have come in large part. Maybe it's not the cause, but bad in-ring work, right? When the WWF was going down in the mid 90s, yes, it was the cartoonish characters and things like that, but in-ring work was not exactly at an all-time high there. WCW, the dying days of WCW. Yes, we've watched the death of WCW on Vice TV and all that kind of stuff, but that was also a time where you were having 3 and 4 minute matches, and people were not satisfied by the matches that WCW was producing. I can't think of a time where you had as high a level of match quality as you're seeing in AEW, yet in many metrics they're struggling. And so I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, Joel, other than to say, to me, my concerns are bigger now than perhaps they've ever been with AEW. And I expressed some of them on the flagship with Wade Keller this week about AEW bringing in more and more people who were in WWE creative under Vince McMahon, which I don't think is the cure-all to ails of AEW. Do you kind of sense some of the same things that I'm feeling here, or am I just kind of out in left field on this?
No, not at all, Greg. I mean, it's the biggest thing to look at is this rating from this past week, which was shocking. Evidently, they had just over 500,000 viewers, and everyone's been trying to make sense of this, and it's going to be difficult to put it into perspective until we see what next week's rating and the week after that, and just see now what is the pattern if they're able to rebound back from this. I know that they did a change of the lead-in, but that's even more of an indictment on AEW because you don't have the Big Bang Theory playing in front of Dynamite, that you're gonna have a lower overall viewership. Instead, they had a replay of the Black Panther movie. I understand that there was also a Kendrick Lamar live stream concert that was going on the same night, and someone who's a fan of Kendrick Lamar, I had no idea that was even happening. So I don't know if I'm just not on it with social media of those things, or how big of a deal that actually was to have an effect on the viewership. But clearly, Greg, I mean, we're hearing this from more and more people, where we talk about, are you turning off just the casual fan? And what we're seeing in the post show and people who listen to this content is that even the other stuff that is quote unquote more insider of trying to connect some of the stuff with New Japan and CMLL into the AEW canon, that it's just not connecting for everyone, that it's not the shiny novelty of seeing like an MJF versus an Hechicero is just not having that same sort of impact as it would have maybe a few years ago on a Forbidden Door show. That because we've already seen a lot of these novelties before, it seems that the audience is hungry for something more or something different than just really good matches and novelties and, oh my gosh, this guy just appeared on the show. Where a lot of AEW in the first few years was really carried by these surprise appearances, these who's going to show up next type stuff, building up to these, just these big, 5-star plus matches. And now that has kind of run its course, that people have seen it, been there, done that, they need something that's going to be a lot more sustainable. And we're seeing that obviously that takes a lot of time, commitment to storylines that people are invested in, something where the stakes are very high. And multiple people have pointed out just those things are headed in the wrong direction, as far as having so many championships on the shows, to where, what is really the importance of it. Whereas, it's very clear in other promotions, what is the number one spot. And I think AEW is making a more concerted effort with Swerve Strickland as champion to make that kind of the top title. But you see this again in things like the Owen Hart Cup, where people are, including myself, were very critical of the bracket. You're seeing that it's not all the top stars going for the championship title match at the biggest show of the year. Instead, you're seeing more of these things that AEW has done, like putting Jeff Jarrett in this because of his connection of Owen Hart, and they had a nice heartfelt video on Collision, explaining how much that means to Jeff Jarrett. But overall, to the business, it just says that it doesn't matter if the best are in this tournament or not. We're just going to put who we want in this tournament. Instead of making this something that people are fighting for and want to prove that they're the best. And I think that has always been a challenge in AEW, is that people feel like the wrestlers are in their very specific lanes, that it's not connected, the stuff isn't intertwined, that everyone is kind of doing these very segmented different things that are different thematically. They're trying to appeal to different people instead of just having an overall tone that you can get yourself invested into. So, I mean, like you said with your rant, I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to wrap all of that up. But overall, Greg, I mean, what you're saying is not off course. And with this rating, I mean, it's definitely, bringing this conversation that I think people get confused that there are some of these trolls and haters of AEW, but there's a lot of people like us who are just concerned about the direction, and it just doesn't seem to be turning around anytime soon.
And the other thing that I forgot to mention was the AEW TV deal. I think we all expect them to get some kind of increase, but the fact that they're coming up against the negotiating window of, Time Warner or TNT and TBS, and Tony Khan has been nothing but effusive in his praise of the television partners. And I think people expected, yes, a deal's going to get done. They're going to stay on TBS and TNT, the way he's talking about them, obviously. And, I think if that were to be the case, it would have been done by now. I'm not sure what the holdup is, but it's, if I'm a huge AEW fan and I put money on them getting a gigantic increase, I might be a little concerned by now that TBS and TNT are letting them go right up against that end of the negotiating window. And who knows, maybe there's somebody else out there that wants to pay more for AEW, and Tony Khan and AEW land on their feet somewhere else. But it is surprising to me that it's gotten this far and we haven't had a deal yet. So that would be one other thing that I would throw in there as well, in terms of, not saying AEW is going to be down the tubes, but there are some concerning signs, I would say. Brock in the chat says when WWE's C show beats AEW's A show in the ratings, it's not a good sign. NXT had a good week. WWE is a hot product right now, and that has a trickle-down effect with all of WWE shows, including NXT. And so, yes, that's part of it too. But Steve throwing in there, you talk about Forbidden Door and how it's kind of lost a little bit of its luster. Some of the main people that were attractions for Forbidden Door, your Okadas, your Jay Whites, your Will Ospreys, are now part of AEW. So now you don't have them as special attractions to show off at Forbidden Door. You still got the AAA wrestlers, the CMLL wrestlers. AEW still has a lot of partnerships out there that I think can make the Forbidden Door concept still work, but I don't think it's as attractive as it once was, just because a lot of those stars are now under the AEW umbrella. And so it's not that special anymore. Joel, I'll give you the last word on any of that before we start going over the card.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that's really surprising to me for this Forbidden Door card is that we've seen a lot of the CMLL wrestlers, including Ultimo Guerrero, just on AEW television. And I believe right now, Hechicero and Stephanie Vicaire are really the only CMLL affiliated. We'll go through the rest of the card in case I'm forgetting somebody, but they've spent a lot of time just putting them on television, granted, giving them a lot of losses. They haven't won and gotten them over on television. But yeah, to your point is that so many of these wrestlers have now been rated from New Japan, and New Japan is struggling on their own to create new stars and get some traction as a promotion. They have ever since the pandemic, but now they just don't have the stars to back it up. that it's it just doesn't have that special shine that it did in 2022 when they had that first show connecting the brands together.
All right, so again, if you're just tuning in, Greg Parks, Joel Dehnel here on Wrestling Night in America. We're here each and every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, with a rotating slate of co-hosts from the pwtorch family. When there's a WWE or AEW pay-per-view or PLE, we go on the air right after that show goes off the air, running down that show, discussing it. And same for Forbidden Door next week. Brandon LeClaire will join me, and we'll talk all things Forbidden Door and recap the show and take your comments and your emails as well. WNIA livecast at gmail.com is where you can send emails if you can't join us live next weekend. So, Joel, let's start with the TNT Championship. We have Takeshita, Mark Briscoe, Jack Perry, Dante Martin, Lio Rush, and a name yet to be announced for the ladder match for the TNT Championship. So this is, going to be the wow factor is probably going to be off the charts for this one. Among the names in the match, Jack Perry is the name that stands out to me in terms of if you're looking for someone, a prediction for this match. Jack Perry, he's associated with the Young Bucks. He's associated with a main event level act. They brought him back from the Abyss. They are obviously interested in treating him like a big deal. This would seem to be step one toward doing that, putting the TNT title around his waist. Takeshita obviously is a name that you probably may think of as a potential winner as well. But the other guys are going to give you a good match, but not so much for the winning. Maybe Joel, can you make an argument for some of the other guys in the match, or is it really Jack Perry and Takeshita to lose here?
We'll see who that TBD is going to be, and maybe they shake things up. But otherwise, I think this is Jack Perry's match with Takeshita. He's been announced for the G1 Climax, so I just don't see them, having him win that match and then going over to New Japan for a month plus to be in the tournament there. And same with Dante Martin, Lio Rush, and Mark Briscoe, all entertaining guys, but they typically they're just not seen in AEW as that level to be able to carry that TNT championship, especially after that was held by Christian Cage and Adam Copeland. Is that they're going to want that to be more storyline driven by somebody like Jack Perry, and just adding another belt to the elite group seems to be the most obvious answer there.
Yeah, a couple comments here about this match. Steve saying Takeshita could win this and then showcase the TNT title when he goes to Japan to be in the G1. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, I don't think. Make that title feel more important by having him be a part of the G1 while champion. Brock saying Takeshita's special talent should be featured more. No argument from me.
Absolutely.
The idea that New Japan will only get over if they do what Formula One did, a reality TV show aimed at a U.S. audience. So a lot of comments in the chat about the state of New Japan right now and how that's sort of affecting Forbidden Door. New Japan is not exactly a hot product right now. So, that certainly hurts, not to mention the Okadas and the Ospreys not being there as well. Azan, who was also in the chat, sent us an email earlier about the ladder match. He said, what do you think about the dynamic between the participants in the TNT ladder match at Forbidden Door, especially with Lio Rush and Dante Martin playing up their past history in AEW? I certainly think it's a good move. I mean, when you have what appear to be a bunch of wrestlers who don't really have anything in common, just being part of a ladder match, you want a story associated with it other than, hey, these are 6 guys going after the TNT title. You want there to be some interpersonal rivalry, something going on among them that you can play up during the match. So, hey, I'm all for it. I wish they would do it with more of these guys. They only have a couple episodes of TV left until then, though.
Yeah, I like that, on some of these other shows of Collision, Rampage, they are trying to do a bit more to hype up these matches. And as you mentioned, like on Collision, they had some more, calling back on the history between Dante Martin and Lio Rush. It's just AEW as a promotion has conditioned their audience that, yeah, they may do some storyline, some background stuff of that, but they've conditioned you to know that there are just some people who are not going to win those big matches. And I would consider the point at this point, the TNT Championship, it seems like something they want to carry to be as a kind of a main story on the show. And I just don't see them right now going with Lio Rush, Dante Martin, or Mark Briscoe, just because of the way that they have been booked and we're conditioned to believe, where they are on the card. That I really think that they've pushed this as Jack Perry's, where the Elite wanted to award this to him. And it would just make a lot of sense to see, possibly some Elite interference or somebody else showing up for the group to help him win this one in the end.
Next match, we'll talk about Jeff Cobb versus TBA for the NJPW World TV title. This one's a weird one to me. You have Jeff Cobb, and I know he made some waves on social media with comments about this several weeks back, I think now. But we're a week away from this show. We don't have an opponent for Jeff Cobb for this match. He's coming over from New Japan for this. Just the timing seems kind of strange. I don't know exactly what the weight is for this. Maybe it'll reveal itself on TV, as I'm throwing out the possibility that Claudio Castagnoli, there's no shortage of wrestlers that AEW has under contract who could be plugged into this spot and have a really good match. Claudio is one of them. There's a host of other wrestlers who are on the roster that you could throw in here. But the fact that they haven't announced an opponent yet does kind of give it an air of a match that doesn't really matter all that much.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the strategy is there with that. I mean, yeah, Claudio versus Jeff Cobb. Yeah, I'm all for that. That'd be a good match there. This New Japan television title that they've had, I mean, has really kind of been hot potato this year. With it changing hands, semi-frequently every, month and a half or so. So Jeff Cobb hasn't had this belt for a ton of time right now to build up some of these other challengers and build up some of these dream matches with them holding it for a while. But I think that you can pick out, anybody who's not on the Forbidden Door card, and Jeff Cobb is capable of having a really good match against any of them. I think that it's probably Jeff Cobb's match to win, unless they want to, add another belt onto AEW television, which I would not be in favor of at this point. It's hard for me to also see CMLL wrestler going up against Jeff Cobb, just given Cobb's type of style. That he's going to be more hard hitting power moves type stuff. So like I said, I mean, you could just peruse what is some of the roster. Maybe they're saving it for something to be announced either on Dynamite as kind of one of those final matches to solidify the card, or it could be something where somebody comes out during the show. But at this point, they just haven't given us a definitive direction or any sort of hints as to who that could be.
We've got a trios match that will pit Chris Jericho, Big Bill, and Brian Keith, otherwise known as the Learning Tree, against Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata. What's your take on the Learning Tree, Joel?
I mean, it's a funny thing that Greg Canner and I go back and forth on. That he really enjoys the Chris Jericho, the Learning Tree stuff, and I have been more of the Chris Jericho goes through that cycle of people get tired of him, they want him to go away, he reinvents himself, people claim look at him again, he gets himself over with a new thing, and then as he gets more in depth into it and he digs in his heels on it, it tends to get more annoying. But I do enjoy just the Learning Tree in doses here. I just don't think that,
and that's the problem for me. Like, this is a one-note joke. If you did it like once a week, okay, maybe it would be tolerable. But they're giving an awful lot of TV time to this that I'm not sure is deserved for what the gimmick entails and what it is. Yeah. So that's kind of my issue. It's one note. It would be a funny note if it was like a short-term thing or if it was done sparingly, but they are pushing this to the hilt.
Absolutely. Tony Khan has relied upon Chris Jericho many times during the company, and he is somebody that, Tony is going to defend Chris and give him his time and let him pitch his ideas, and let him run with different things. When I think most people would be in favor of Chris just taking some time off for a while after getting a lot of please retire chants. But Chris, tried to turn the allegations that we never really got some follow up on. He tried to turn this into something where people are more annoyed with the gimmick and more annoyed with what he's doing, because every week he comes out there, he just gets more, he's just digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this. He's not backing off of this character and what people are saying about it. It's almost in defiance of that. And it's taken up, it's not a huge amount of TV time every week, but it shows up on most of these shows. It's most of these shows. It definitely gets a full segment on most of the shows. And it just, it has not stuck the landing for me. I'm not sure how much more this really does for Brian Keith. I'm sure it's better than Brian Keith just going in and losing matches on Collision every week. Having, some sort of brushing of shoulders with Chris Jericho.
He's got a catchphrase now.
He's got that going for him. I think Big Bill, is capable of, I see bigger things for Big Bill than just being the sidekick to Chris Jericho. But if that helps him get to that next destination, then so be it. But it is a one note gimmick. And, I don't think that he really did a whole lot for Hook to get him over, but certainly on the flip side of this match, the little stuff that they've done with Samoa Joe and Hook, I think people have very much enjoyed seeing that. I think that it's a very natural pairing between those two, doing a lot of that backstage stuff where it's like you're almost in on their insider meetings of stuff with Shibata, you doing the camera of that of those segments. So that aspect I've liked of it. And, they're trying to hopefully complete the story here with them going back up against each other. But I don't see this match as being the final resolution for it. I think at some point we're still going to get back to Jericho and Hook. So I expect there's still to be plenty more of that.
I do like Hook and Joe together. I think they have good chemistry. I think it makes sense. Samoa Joe is a good mentor on screen for Hook. So I think that makes a lot of sense for them getting together. So I have enjoyed that. The Jericho thing reminds me a little bit of when one of the times he came back to WWE and he had done the teases about coming back. And he comes back and he gets this reception and he milks it and he milks it and he milks it. And he's kind of teasing, saying something on the mic, and he just kind of milks the reaction. And then he just leaves. And it's kind of like we're sitting there saying, wait a minute, what did we just see? Like what, it was kind of like Jericho being very meta in that moment.
Yeah.
About, the comebacks and everything like that and the teases and all that kind of stuff, sort of a commentary on that in a way. This feels like that, only a lot flatter. And I don't know if it's just kind of that perspective is lost or what the case is, but that's kind of how it feels to me. Let's move on to Zack Sabre Jr. and Orange Cassidy. I think we have an on-screen graphic for this, actually. There we go, right there.
There it is.
We have it. Right there. Orange Cassidy, Zack Sabre Jr., Sunday, June 30th, Long Island, New York, Forbidden Door. That's next Sunday. We're going to be here. So anyway, Orange Cassidy, Zack Sabre Jr. We got an email question on this one from Azan as well. He says, where do you see AEW going with the struggles of Orange Cassidy has been facing lately, like the Don Callis family, Zack Sabre, coming out to different music to reflect his emotions? Orange Cassidy, not exactly famous for wearing his emotions on his sleeve, right? So are we seeing a transformation in the Orange Cassidy character to kind of take the next step in the evolution of this character, or is it not that deep?
I'm not sure how much he's going to divert to this character that has gotten him over. And I think that a large segment of people still enjoy seeing this, that he's proven that it's beyond just an independent wrestler gimmick, that this is something that can get over on a bigger stage, to where I've said that I've heard from a lot of people who don't typically watch wrestling, they check it out, they see Orange Cassidy, they see what he's all about, and it's one of the things that has drawn them to the show, to wanting to follow it some more. So I don't know if he's going to have a drastic departure, but he's always been an interesting one to follow, because of this evolution of his character, the story of him, where he still does the hands in pocket, the lazy thumbs up, the sunglasses, all of those signature trademarks. But now
the fact that he's been able to get this level of mileage out of that character is amazing, and I think speaks to his creativity.
Absolutely, and the way he plays it, just with his body motions, his subtle facial expressions with things, but then the energy and the worker that he is in the ring, I mean, certainly offsets any of the criticisms and stuff, as far as that character. So I have been just very, very impressed with him. You know, not seeing much of him before, except for when he was as Fire Ant. I didn't see much of the Orange Cassidy character before he got to AEW, and just very much questioning how it would develop. But as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, that was kind of when they'd introduce a lot of things and it would get over to the crowd, basically instantly, and stuff. People would love most things on the show for some time, and he's had some incredible lasting power there. But certainly the story between him and Trent is not over. We will continue to see more on Trent's journey there, because that has been a friendship and partnership that they've had since his debut, going back to 2019 AEW. So I do expect a very good match here. I mean, Orange Cassidy always delivers in these types of matches. I mean, people really scratched their head when he had his first Forbidden Door match against Will Ospreay, and that turned out to be the best match of that show. That he can go up against a lot of different styles, and they tried to prove that in the multi-man tag matches that Orange Cassidy is going up against the submission wrestler in Zack Sabre Jr., and you're just going to see Orange, I think, really have a good match doing a really different style here.
And frustrating Zack Sabre Jr. At almost every turn. I'm sure that's going to be something to look out for as well. MJF versus Hechicero is the match that's up next. You know, this is interesting because MJF, he comes back, a lot of fanfare, different look, different attitude than when we had last seen him. Seemingly effective. I think it's gotten a thumbs up from most people that this turn back to the character that with the edge that he had kind of lost playing with Adam Cole. Hechicero is an interesting choice. Obviously, very talented guy. He's been on AEW television multiple times. We've been able to see all that he brings to the table. Definitely stylistically, it's going to be an interesting match. I just look at Hechicero and MJF, and I do think there is definitely an imbalance there in terms of, push within AEW from what we've seen. And so I don't know if it was maybe an MJF request that he work with Hechicero or someone like Hechicero, but if I had been fantasy booking MJF's match at Forbidden Door 3 months ago, Joel, Hechicero would probably not have made my list. And again, not to say it's not going to be a good match. Maybe it is a good match to get MJF a solid win to sort of kick off. He beat Rush. He beats Hechicero now. Certainly gathering momentum as he works his way back into the mix in AEW, but still a little bit of a choice that's off the beaten path here.
Definitely. I mean, definitely. I don't think that was on anybody's bingo card to see MJF going against Hechicero. Where it falls into that category of novelty matches, of wanting to see two very different, unique styles. How does MJF go up against this guy? I mean, there's going to have to be a lot of rolling around the ring, a lot of submissions, a lot of the stuff we were talking about for the Zack Sabre Jr. match. You're going to see from Hechicero in this one, where it's certainly a challenge for MJF, and he has always come to those, he has overcome a lot of those challenges and questions about his work rate. Nobody questions him as far as his character, getting himself over on the microphone. But Hechicero is definitely another one of those challenges for him, working with this different type of style luchador, where it's not a guy who's just gonna be doing a lot of flips and dives. That there's going to be a lot of mat work involved there, and he's just not been. He's had some good matches on AEW television against Bryan Danielson. He's been involved in some of those multi-tag matches, but certainly being involved with the Gates of Agony does not give you much confidence that there's going to be any doubt about the outcome of this one. That I think it is just MJF now has come back. He's got a fresh coat of paint. He changed a couple things about his character. A lot of the things that people did not like about that babyface run, he has tried to stomp all of that out. He did that in his first promo coming out, talking about how who he is now, and what he's going to do moving forward, and turning the page on a lot of those things. So I expect it, to be a good match. I mean, because they're two good workers, I think that they'll figure it out. But certainly, I think that this is just kind of another stepping stone for MJF until he gets to the next thing, which is seemingly against Will Ospreay at some point.
Yeah, the tease, I was surprised they teased that so quickly. I thought they would kind of let them do their own thing, unless, I mean, is it possible that's the plan for All In? With them doing, and I had been of the opinion, save Ospreay versus Swerve for All In, but they're doing it here at Forbidden Door. So, does that lessen the chance for Ospreay versus Swerve at All In? Does Ospreay win the title at Forbidden Door and defend against MJF at All In? So I think that very short confrontation that they had on TV recently opens a lot of questions about MJF and Ospreay, because and it could be setting the table for something 6 months down the line. It could be a tease to say, just be prepared for this. We're going to come back to this at some point. Or it could be as soon as All In. So what was since you brought it up, what was your take on that? How did you read that face-to-face that ended up taking place, the impromptu face-to-face between Will Ospreay and MJF?
I mean, it's two of their biggest stars that they have, Will Ospreay and MJF. They've never wrestled each other before. Again, two very unique styles. And certainly they are the two guys that people see as the future of the company, who are going to carry the main events for them. And I think that this was definitely a signal to people that, here's a alternative direction that may not be what you wanted when we signed Will Ospreay back in December, that a lot of people had already been talking about. Well, it's obvious. You just have Will Ospreay go into the main event at Wembley, because the guy even has a tattoo on him, from the last Wembley event, because it meant so much to him. And the story seemed like it just wrote itself, that you bring this guy in, he's got a ton of momentum. He's even mentioned on TV this summer of Ospreay and the opponents that he defeated last year, and how he just had tremendous momentum, and just carrying that into his now run in AEW. That I think I think that this is definitely signaling to people that you may not be getting Ospreay in the main event of Wembley, because I just don't see a scenario where Ospreay wins the championship here, and then defends it in Wembley. And unless he is then the wild card for the Owen Hart Cup tournament, which again would just feel like more favoritism for Ospreay, considering he's been in a lot of these gauntlet matches, and getting himself into prime position, and also winning that international title. That it would feel strange, but certainly it's a possibility to do that and then run that match back at Wembley. But you would think that they'd want to have something unique for that show, not just rerunning the same match that they did on pay-per-view the show before. So it certainly seems to me, as far as the people who are announced, that Bryan Danielson is a very strong candidate. from what he said, that he has cut a couple different promos that this is his last full-time year. It may not be his last actual year of wrestling, but people have been clamoring to see him go for that world title and give some extra meaning to that, because they know that he is very capable of doing that throughout his career, of giving those championships some meaning. And so to see him go up for that championship at Wembley would certainly feel like a huge match. But just given the location being in London, it just seemed like, Ospreay was a foregone conclusion. But I think that if you did have Bryan Danielson versus Swerve in the main event there, you also had Ospreay versus MJF. Those are two very unique and good matches that I think would draw a lot of interest from AEW fans to believe that those are two very big matches for their biggest show of the year.
And speaking of Danielson, Bryan Danielson is in action next Sunday at Forbidden Door against New Japan's Shingo Takagi. This is a first round match in the Owen Hart Cup tournament. And Joel, this might be the match that I am most looking forward to at Forbidden Door. I feel like I'm saying that every month about Bryan Danielson matches, but he's had an absolute murderer's row of interesting opponents that he's been able to face. Perhaps many of them handpicked by him, so not a surprise. But the idea of Takagi coming over, facing Bryan Danielson, this is one of those true Forbidden Door matches where the anticipation of this matches the ideals of the Forbidden Door concept. So, if Danielson, the Owen Hart Cup tournament certainly is something that Danielson's going to want to go far in. But what's your take on this match? I mean, Danielson, I don't think the end is in doubt. I think it's Danielson to win, but a match like this, and I know some people are going to scoff at this idea, but the result may not matter as much as the ride of seeing Danielson versus Takagi in this context.
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to see much more of Shingo. After the Forbidden Door show, they brought him into the United States now, and so they're trying to introduce him more to the AEW audience, where he just had a match against AR Fox, and so he's he's going to be shown a little bit more on television. I would assume in the coming week here before the match at Forbidden Door, but they tried to show some tension between the two, where Danielson was trying to congratulate Shingo after his match, and Shingo kind of denied him and walked out at him to create some tension, some conflict between the two, that it's not just, hey, let's go out there and just have another banger of a match. But I think that's exactly what it's going to be at the end of the day. Anyone who has seen Shingo's work knows that him going against Bryan Danielson is what you said, Greg, is like the spirit of this Forbidden Door show, of having these dream matchups that you didn't think that you were going to get before. And now the door is open to make these, amazing fantasy style matches. But ultimately, I agree that I think Danielson is destined to win this match. I just don't see Danielson getting bounced out in the first round of this tournament. But certainly, I think that Shingo versus Danielson has potential to be one of the best matches on the show. Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's right up there. I think you could make an argument for that match as much as you can any other match on this card if you're trying to pick out what might be the match of the night. Mercedes Moné against Stephanie Vakir, and this is a winner-take-all match. Moné putting her TBS championship on the line, Vakir putting her New Japan Strong Women's title on the line. Remember, that is the title that Moné was, I believe, supposed to win, and an injury kind of took her out of the running for that. So, we're kind of in an interesting point with Mercedes Moné, because she comes in, has the feud with Willow Nightingale, and wins the TBS championship from her, but has to pivot almost immediately into now getting ready for a feud with someone from outside of AEW. So it's an interesting situation, because Moné is still very new to AEW. So you would think that you would want to get her into a feud with someone else right away to kind of establish that. But instead, she has to concentrate on a feud with someone outside of AEW. So I feel like there's been a little bit of awkwardness with that. But, this will, again, probably be a pretty good match. I would expect Mercedes Moné to come away with the championship. And I guess we'll see from there. Joel, thoughts on this match?
Yeah, this is another one where AEW is really trying to do what they can to get people to know who Stephanie Vaquer is. They've done some multiple video packages. Even Mercedes herself went to CMLL. She went into Stephanie's house, and I saw some highlights of that. That was also, I believe, on Collision that they showed you some highlights of those two going back and forth in Mexico. Which I thought was pretty cool to send her down there to get that experience, introduce her to the Mexican audience, and try to get some interest from there as well. But I expect this to be a really good match. I mean, from what I've seen of Stephanie, is that she is establishing herself as one of the top female workers in the business. Her and Mariah May have certainly put their best foot forward and establish themselves as some of the best workers in the business, but certainly in this promotion. So I'm expecting a very good match between these two, but it's been a roller coaster for Mercedes ever since she's come in, with some of the language that she's used, her promo style, her just the way that she's promoted herself, her character, that it's been very confusing. Are we supposed to boo her? Are we supposed to cheer her? The CEO chants during her theme song has just been a strange thing. It feels very heelish, but they're continuing on with that. And because Willow is such a baby face, it just really turned Mercedes into a heel, and it felt like they were leaning into that at one point. And now it seems like no, Mercedes is just kind of going back into what she wants to do, which is, to me, it's not necessarily just babyface or heel. It's just what Mercedes wants to do, being herself. And I just don't think that that's very clear. And I think that the best destination for Mercedes, honestly, would be for her probably to just play a heel role at this point and have babyface challengers come up against her, and wait for some of these other talents to either rise up to be that next big babyface. You could go back to Willow at some point down the road, but there's also a lot of injured talent, including Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker, at some point need to come back and have some feuds with her. So I expect it to be very good in the ring, but as far as Mercedes coming out of this, I think that it's still very gray and ambiguous, as to how we're supposed to feel about this character.
It certainly felt like she came out of the Willow match as a babyface. Her celebration after the fact was very babyface-ish. Her first challenge afterward was, I believe, Sky Blue, who revealed that she was the one that attacked Mercedes Moné during that interview with Alex Marvez when we were trying to figure out who that was, and wondered if that was ever going to be followed up on. That was, she was clearly a babyface there against Sky Blue. So yeah, it's been a little confusing. Especially with this character. I mean, this character that she's leaned into so much does feel more like a heel character. And so, if she wanted to be a babyface, there are parts of that character that I might strip away or not emphasize as much. But, I'm not on the AEW writing team. So I yell into the void just like everybody else does about everything. Anyway, not yelling into the void. We're talking to all of these wonderful people watching us and listening to us.
I'm listening, time, right? Greg. Our listeners here on YouTube are listening to us as well.
I appreciate that.
Hopefully somebody can make some change, though.
Hopefully somebody, or at least can make some sense of it for us.
Yeah.
We have Jon Moxley against Tetsuya Naito for the New Japan IWGP World Championship. And Naito is probably the biggest name in New Japan that can go. And I say that because Tanahashi probably a bigger name, but his knees are so shot. I wouldn't want to put him in this kind of high profile situation on a major pay-per-view. So you've got Naito, who had been phased down a little bit, I think. He was in the opening match against Callum Newman on the last big show for New Japan. And then at the end of the show comes out and challenges Jon Moxley for the title. So Naito is a guy who you can plug in anytime because he is a former champion, has won the G1 before, all of this stuff, all these credentials. And American fans, from what they know about New Japan, probably know about Naito and know that he's a big star there. So it makes sense from that perspective. And if you want the opportunity to get the belt off of Jon Moxley, have someone take it back to Japan. I think Naito is as good a choice right now as any, which goes back to what we talked about earlier and probably speaks to some of the issues with New Japan booking right now, that Naito is still, after all these years, after all the injuries and things like that, the best choice to win the belt here. There does seem to be kind of a void in New Japan for new stars to rise up the card. Hopefully those new stars are established in the upcoming G1. But Moxley, I think, surprised people winning the IWGP Championship. And here, I wouldn't be surprised to see him lose it to Naito, take it back, especially with the G1 coming up.
I agree with that. At the time, it felt like this was a breath of fresh air for New Japan to get a new champion, so not going back to one of the same people who have held it multiple times before in Japan, or trying to give it to somebody who wasn't quite ready for that position, or they haven't built up for that position. Is more honestly what it would be. Whereas Moxley has had a presence in New Japan for a number of years. So it made a lot of sense for him to get a rub with that championship belt because it meant a lot for him. And he also got to make a number of appearances back in Japan holding that championship belt and was able to bring that onto AEW television. So I think that as a partnership that was very successful. I wish he would have gotten more of an array of opponents, more than just Bren Narita and Shota Umino and Evil on the Dominion show. That I think that there was some other younger talent that I would have liked to, maybe they don't defeat him for it, but I think that he could have had some good matches with to put them on the map of some of the American audience who's maybe not aware of some of those some of the younger talent in New Japan. But this would make a lot of sense here that he gets his run with it. You go back and have the rematch at Forbidden Door, and then Naito takes that belt back. Naito, as you mentioned before, I mean, he's the biggest star active wrestler on the roster there. I mean, sure, yeah, Tanahashi, but he's not wrestling on a full-time basis anymore. And Naito is, the last one of that kind of that big name that can make a difference. But also, I mean, he's not too far off from where Tanahashi is as far as, being put back on the bench. So it's, New Japan is in a really tough position at this point. And an idea I've advocated more is trying to send more of the AEW wrestlers, of guys that, don't send your worst people or people you don't see anything in, but certainly if you don't have something for somebody, like they're doing with Takeshita, where I think that, there has been some damage done to his character. He's taken some really tough losses. It just seems like they don't have a really great direction for him right now after he got a lot of wins, towards the end of last year, that he's now going to be in the G1 climax. That I think that they could do that with a bit more of these wrestlers. But yeah, you could make a case. I see Azan says in here that Mox might still win. I mean, certainly you can make a case for that, but it just seems to make a lot of sense to me that this would just be the opportunity for New Japan to get that back onto a Japanese wrestler, and just take that belt off of Excursion, so to say, and bring that back into Japan.
Brock had this point saying, why does AEW have a hard time pinning heel or face down on some of their talent? I think this is in reference to our discussion about Mercedes Moné. I do wonder how much of it, Joel, is the fact that talent has a lot more say in their characters. Mercedes Moné is going to come in with the money that she commanded in her contract. She's going to have a level of say over her character. I don't think anyone really questions that. And so, you have wrestlers with more freedom. That comes with some positives, but it also potentially comes with some negatives, that being they're going to do what they want, and that might not align necessarily with a true 100% babyface alignment or 100% heel alignment. So, that's the biggest thing I can think of specifically about the Mercedes Moné situation as well. But if you got any other comments on that or any other ideas about why that is so difficult for AEW with some wrestlers, have at it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is definitely a major part of that is the latitude that a lot of wrestlers are granted to do what they feel is best for their character. That Tony Khan, has certain people that he trusts, like a Chris Jericho, like a John Moxley, some of these people that it's just, hey, here's you're going to go out for this amount of time, and you're going to cut this promo, and you just go do your thing out there. And I think that works very well for the veterans, the masters of that type of stuff. But some other people could clearly use some more guidance on those things to steer their character in the direction that the booking would like it to be. So I think there could definitely be some more reining in there. But also the AEW audience is a different audience from for example, from WWE, where WWE is going to be more of a compliant audience with what they're seeing, that if they're enjoying it, they're going to give AEW or give WWE the reaction that they're looking for. Whereas AEW is more of that, has a lot more people who come from kind of those independent wrestling audiences, where they're going to cheer a lot for the things that they like. They appreciate the performances of it. Or if they just like to do something, then they'll do more of that. Like people like to do the Scissor Me Daddy song, even though the Acclaimed as an act is very stale, but it's still a fun thing for people to do when they're at those shows. MJF is very funny and entertaining, so it's also hard to get people to boo him in a lot of instances because they just appreciate the work that he's doing. So it's just very different audiences, and then it's also just not being reined in as much as I think that it really should be, to give more clear direction as to how you should feel about different wrestlers.
Yeah, with the Bryan Danielson thing, and to a lesser extent the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club, it's like, Bryan Danielson is in the last year of his career. If he wants to wrestle somebody, Tony Khan's going to let him wrestle somebody, whether that opponent is a babyface or a heel. And probably in Danielson's mind, it's like, if he's a babyface, I'll be a heel. If he's a heel, I'll be a babyface. It's that simple. And unfortunately, that as a viewer, that causes confusion into what you're really seeing, and it's that inconsistency can be problematic when you're trying to tell stories, which is what you're also trying to do in between having good matches here. So the second to last match, the penultimate match that we'll talk about, is Toni Storm versus Mina Shirakawa, AEW Women's Championship. This may be the second most anticipated match by me, behind Bryan Danielson and Shingo Takagi. Where do Mariah May's true, where does her beliefs lie? Where does her friendship truly lie? Is it with Mina, her friend from Stardom? Is it with Toni Storm? So we may find out the answer to that here. And I thought they've built this up pretty well for a Forbidden Door match, where a lot of times it's just, hey, it's kind of the Danielson Shingo thing. Hey, here are these two wrestlers that are going to have an awesome match. Just enjoy,
Yeah.
And to your point earlier, they have done a little bit to give their some resistance there between the two wrestlers, but they've really dove in with the Mariah May stuff here, and where do her allegiances lie. And so that's a part of it that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the fact that Toni Storm seems to have finally found her footing in the ring with this character. And then just seeing what Mina Shirakawa can do. Obviously, Stardom wrestlers have a terrific reputation from an in-ring standpoint. So to see them here on this Forbidden Door card, I'm heartened to see that.
Yeah, this one's really cool that this year they're incorporating the Stardom element of the show, and so you get a former Stardom wrestler in Toni Storm going against somebody who's currently on the roster in Mina Shirakawa, and it just really fits in well with that storyline that they've already been telling on television with Mariah May, again another former Stardom wrestler. So again, in the sense of the forbidden door element of the show, this just really kind of checks all those boxes of something that fits well to be on this. I think that they've done a really good job of trying to get over the character of Mina Shirakawa, introduce who she is, what's the history that she has with Mariah May. They've shown several video packages. We've seen Mina Shirakawa on television multiple times with the different the with her cozying up to Mariah May, the commentators talking about the history of that, the facial expressions of Toni Storm, helping to tell that story, being less cartoonish facial expressions and more like I said, just trying to help that tell that story. But certainly, I think the direction that it seems that this is heading is that now, in the beginning, Mariah May was the super fan of Toni Storm, where she started dressing like her, came out to her music. And you're seeing that Toni has now really kind of cozied up to Mariah May. And now Toni is really the one who is initiating this type of contact with her, where we saw in their tag match that they had just last night on Collision, that even Toni Storm is covering Mariah May, trying to save her in a lot of instances, where you're just not seeing that much from Mariah herself. So it seems to me that they are finally taking this in a direction where they're going to stop fighting the audiences. And again, another confusing character, where people just like her, and so they want to cheer her even though she's been put into a heel position. That I think that they're going to finally correct this one and put Toni into a babyface position. And I think that just elevating Mariah into a heel character and eventually getting her into that the championship match at Wembley makes all the sense in the world. That I think it would be a mistake to not build up to that match. Now, I don't know where a definitive turn for Mariah happens. Could that be at Forbidden Door? Possibly. Does that happen maybe later down the road? In the Owen Hart Cup tournament, that's also possible. But certainly I think that there needs to be some sort of angle leading up to that big match. But Greg, I just agree that I think that, one of the criticisms of Tony Khan's booking has been the pushing of the women's division. And I think that what they've done with Toni Storm and really trying to make a star out of Mariah May by taking it slowly, not introducing her as a big star from somewhere else, like we've seen in many other instances, for just to watch them, get some wins in the beginning. And then, some of them just kind of fall to taking some losses on Collision or just not being featured as much, and not in the level that people were hoping in the beginning. That I think that they have taken Mariah May into somebody who can really become a big difference maker for them in the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Azan asks the obvious question: does Mariah turn on Toni here? I do think Mariah May versus Toni Storm is probably the biggest match you could do at All In if you want to go that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's a full turn here or not, I think that would be really interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to be a full turn, but we'll see. I think it's going to be really interesting to see that play out. I feel invested in this story.
Yeah.
So that's a win for AEW, especially in a women's division where one of the complaints over AEW's history is how they booked the women, how they've treated the women on television in terms of characters, and not giving them enough of substance to do. So, kudos to them for that, I would say. The main event, Swerve Strickland, Will Ospreay, AEW title. I did a 12-minute hot take with Wade Keller a couple of weeks ago about the decision to do Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland at Forbidden Door instead of doing it at All In, or in addition to doing it All In. I do like how they've had Swerve and Ospreay confront each other. I do like the mic work that the two have exchanged. I'm still not 100% convinced this is the right decision to do this match at this time instead of saving the first match between these two, or Will Ospreay challenging for the title at All In. But I'm kind of warmed up to the idea. It may depend on the result here. If Ospreay wins and goes into All In as champion and he's defending against somebody, hey, maybe that's a good thing. If he doesn't win here, goes into All In a non-title match against, say, an MJF, still a big opponent, still a big match, but it's not the title at Wembley. So I would probably be a little disappointed in that. But Joel, just your overall thoughts on the decision to do Ospreay versus Swerve here when so many people were looking forward to it at All In.
I think they needed something big for this show to carry this to be that main that big main event to where that wasn't in question, and certainly putting Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland on the show gives you that main event, that selling point for not just being this novelty show that people can decide to skip out on. They've given you a match that if you're following AEW, you absolutely need to see this one and see the outcome of it moving forward. I think that it's very curious though, why they chose to do that here outside of what I said, and not save this for All In, and instead go with, potentially Danielson or whoever else comes out of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. I just think it's difficult again to see how to see Will Ospreay winning this match here and then defending that championship at Wembley, because why would you just not have him win the title there when that would just be so much bigger for that audience? You haven't moved a lot of tickets lately. They're around 41,000 right now out, which is very successful to sell tickets to a wrestling show. But for people saying, well, they could just do that next year at All In, I don't think it's any guarantee that they're going to be able to do Wembley Stadium again next year. I think that they'll continue to have All In, but maybe it is at a smaller stadium. Maybe it is at a soccer stadium, or you do something at the O2 Arena, but it just wouldn't have the same impact as being at Wembley Stadium. So I just feel that you had an opportunity with Ospreay and they wanted to capitalize on Swerve Strickland. And I think that, that for the most part, that has been a good move to make Swerve Strickland. He has become a bigger star holding on to that championship. He's definitely in an elevated position, but it has been at the cost, I think, of having Ospreay winning the title, unless he is that wild card spot in the Owen Cup tournament, which as I mentioned, I think also presents some other issues, rather than just having Swerve go up against somebody else and then Ospreay winning the title at All In. And so that's what leads me to think that because they're doing this match here, that they're probably not going to do the same thing at All In, when they want to move some tickets. They want to get people really interested in that show, and then also the teasing of that MJF match against Ospreay. So it's it's just a very curious decision. Whether it's the right or wrong decision, we'll find out when we see this buy rate for this show, when we see the build and buy rate for the All In show, just seeing some of the follow up on that. But it's going to be an interesting spot. I'm looking at the chat here too, that I have mentioned Hangman as well. We're seeing that that also being mentioned as a possibility. That also brings up some other things of, do you want to have Hangman come back as a heel? Does he then lose in that match? I just think it's it's interesting problem to have that's going to give us a lot of talking points, but I'm not sure that AEW has put themselves in the easiest position to get out of this on top here.
Yeah, we had the comment that I put on the screen there about Don Callis potentially causing, or one of the Don Callis family members potentially causing Ospreay the match. He sort of had that throwaway line that he didn't care about Don Callis, and then they showed Callis and the family watching backstage. Callis didn't seem all that upset by it, but maybe he was just stewing inside. I don't know. And it'll come out. Kyle Fletcher seemed a bit put off by it. We'll see if he ends up getting involved there, but that's an out for AEW in this match if they choose to take it in the main event with Ospreay and Swerve Strickland. So before we move on, just a reminder again, if you're just tuning in, that we will have coverage post Forbidden Door next Sunday. Brandon LeClaire and I will be here on pwtorchdailycast.com on the PW Torch YouTube page, covering that show. We will be here with all the results, all the reaction, taking your comments, taking your questions in the chat, and taking your emails at wnialivecast@gmail.com. So be sure to tune in for that. We have a couple off-topic emails that we'll get to before we close up shop today, Joel. Some big stuff happening in WWE this week that we'll have to address here. One is dipping back into the mailbag. Azan asks, is Braun Breaker ending Sami Zayn's Intercontinental title run? Does it define Sami down for his future as a top guy in the mix? I would certainly say that WWE, if not dethroning Sami Zayn, then they're building Braun Breaker up for something big. He's interacting with Sami Zayn, interacting with Sheamus in that Intercontinental title area of the card. So even before that, he was being booked as a monster, attacking people, laying people out. So it's clear that WWE has big plans for Braun Breaker. I don't know when Sami Zayn loses that Intercontinental Championship, but I can say that if Braun Breaker would be in my top 3 of people who I think would defeat Sami Zayn. You talk about, does that hurt Sami's kind of upward mobility? I mean, I don't think he had any. Maybe that's a rude way of saying it, but I'm not sure there's a lot of future in the main events for Sami Zayn in terms of challenging for any main titles. So I don't think losing to Braun Breaker in the context of the Intercontinental Championship is going to do anything to hurt Sami's chances of moving up the card, because I'm not sure how high those chances are to begin with. But what's your take, Braun Breaker? I mean, is he the guy that should, or you would have, end Sami Zayn's IC title run?
It's a new type of WWE, and it's getting people used to that everyone wanted to just see, either they win this match and they keep going up to the world title position, or they're going to be pushed all the way down the card and they're going to be destroyed and ruined. And I just don't think that that's the case anymore. I think that Sami Zayn has proved his value. The people in charge absolutely see his value. He's been put in main event spots. And put in a good position that maybe he's not seen as that top person to win the world championship, because nowadays it's just such a few people who do that. The really top title there, maybe that world heavyweight title, he could get there at some point. But I just think that he's really established himself as a main person on the roster, that I just don't see that there being that type of damage done to him, especially against somebody like Braun Breaker, who they see a lot in him. I mean, they have carefully curated his career, that they're not going to do something to damage Braun with the way that they booked him in NXT. We're very careful when people thought that he was ready to come up to the main roster. They held off doing so. And I think that has been a good move to wait for the right time to do that. But for Braun to take that title for him, would make a ton of sense. I mean, you go from Gunther, who's the longest reigning Intercontinental champion. I think that's done a lot for him. Now he wins the King of the Ring here. He's in a really good position despite losing that championship to Sami Zayn. I think Sami has a number of different things that he can go back to. There's always the option of doing another thing with Kevin Owens down the road. But I think that he'll always be somebody who's featured, protected, in a good spot there. But definitely Braun Breaker could benefit from beating the guy who beat the longest reigning Intercontinental champion, and then having his long run with that belt.
We'll close up with an email from John. And he asks about the Wyatt Six, and specifically Bray Wyatt's potential contributions to this. He brings up the idea that some authors like Emily Dickinson, J.R.R. Tolkien, have left behind notes about their manuscripts and things like that. And John asks if we think, if it turns out that Bray / Wyndham Rotunda left extensive notes and plans related to this new Uncle Howdy-led faction, that would WWE be wise if they followed these instructions implicitly, or there needs to be a lot of editing and different creative voices? I would be surprised if that was the case, first of all, if he had left notes behind for this, maybe. But I think that what we saw out of Bray Wyatt, and knowing that he had a lot of say in that character, I think you could take some of his ideas, but I do think it would need to be quite heavily edited, because a lot of his ideas were very interesting, but they really struggled to fit within the world of professional wrestling,
Yes.
and God bless Bray for wanting to break down those barriers, because I think it's important to push the boundaries and to push the limits of what you can do in WWE and in professional wrestling. But when you find those boundaries, you have to learn to pull back and say, okay, that didn't work. I know where the line is now. I know not to touch the hot stove, whatever you want to say. I never got the sense that I could tell that Bray knew where that line was, because he was constantly pushing up against it. So I would definitely like to see different voices creatively in giving this a chance. We've seen the Bray Wyatt stuff. We've seen the Bray Wyatt universe within WWE, and we've seen what works and what doesn't. And hopefully the people now running it, whether Bo Dallas has an extensive say in it or not, or whomever, I hope that those people can take the lessons learned from the Bray Wyatt stuff and apply this now to the Wyatt Six group. Joel, what's your comments on that after seeing how it debuted on Monday? And again, I talked about this at length with Wade Keller on the flagship this past week. But what did you think of? What did you think of, first of all, how it was portrayed on Raw, and then more to John's point, is this something that you think needs a wider array of creative voices for it to really work?
It's I thought that the execution of that angle absolutely delivered, where they made it a very memorable, throughout that whole show, from how they've been building this up for a long time with the QR codes. So you got to give them credit for how long they've been building this up and wanting to do this and wanting to do a continuation for Bray Wyatt. And then they promised a massacre, and then that's exactly what you got. And Bray was not able to do that level of stuff in the version of WWE that he was a part of, where it was a lot of speaking in tongues, and you just weren't able to do that type of angle like that, where it looks like Chad Gable is literally taking a gunshot wound to the head, and you have where it looks like blood splattered on the back there, where I think that stuff is, fits right into what WWE wants to do in 2024, where, if you save those spots, you can make them very meaningful, like this one was, where I think this is a debut despite how the rest of it plays out. I think it will still be talked about, and people will remember that because of the connection to Bray Wyatt. But as far as, how it continues to work in the ring, I struggle to remember or think of anybody who Bray faced, in this Fiend gimmick or before that, who he was really able to get over in the ring. That it was really about getting his character over, and there was never really a culmination of what he was doing and what he was trying to say in his messages. That it was just kind of speaking in tongues, leading to a match. He'd win or lose, and then you just rinse and repeat the same thing. And so you definitely want to have these different chapters in this story and leading to something that has some sort of ultimate payoff with it, which will be the challenge with a gimmick like this, to have it keep recurring without some sort of payoff of somebody overcoming this or whatever that next evolution is. But the people involved in this in the faction is just concerning, because they are I think they're all fine wrestlers. They're valuable enough to be on a main roster, but none of them have really gotten over on a major level. You do have Eric Rowan, who is a part of the Wyatt family before, but certainly he struggled to find some success without being a part of that faction before. And so you just wonder if Bo Dallas, who struggled just playing the Bo Dallas character and the different versions of that, if he's enough to carry this group and carry them forward. And I think that is going to be the challenge. But certainly, I just don't want to see this as the main thing for WWE. I think it's something that can kind of pop up, every once in a while. They can continue to do some of those QR codes and have some of the mystery of when they're going to appear again. But I think that there's going to need to really be a strategic, thought out planning of who these people are going to go up against, when you're going to do that, how they're going to get other people over, how they're going to get themselves over. Certainly, I think that debut and some of the shine and fond memories that people have of the Fiend and Bray Wyatt definitely plays in their favor. But it's going to be difficult once they have a match, and you try to go from there, because I don't think that they can be a regular fixture of seeing these people in the ring every week. It's going to have to be something that's hyped up to very specifically with some very detailed ways that it plays out after that.
And that was John's next question. It was, how would you make this group translate to the ring and winning matches? That's something that I talked with Wade about. That was my main concern about this. I thought, how it was presented on Monday created a lot of buzz, created a lot of intrigue. So it was successful in that area. But how does that translate to the ring? How does that, even if it's not supernatural, and Wade made the argument, they didn't really do anything supernatural on Monday night. I mean, even setting that aside, how did these characters, as they were presented, even on Monday, translate to the ring? I mean, how does that work? What do winning matches mean to them? Like to these characters that we saw decimate an entire backstage area. Like how? So it's hard because the psychology of professional wrestling doesn't seem to apply here. The psychology that we know of what makes professional wrestling tick does not apply for these characters. And so you have to, I think that's where the difficulty is. The difficulty is not in introducing interesting characters. The difficulty is not making compelling vignettes or doing pre-production backstage that is fascinating and gets people talking. It's knowing that these wrestlers eventually have to wrestle, and how do you make that part of the characters compelling without making the same mistakes that they made during Bray Wyatt's tenure in WWE?
I mean, it is a mighty challenge where it sounds very good in concept to bring them back and take these characters, these puppet characters that Bray had created, and wanting to make them into a real life group. But it's just going to be a major challenge, and I'm hoping that they're creative enough to have thought a lot of this through. But at this point, I'm just having a difficult time seeing who even is involved with this group, who goes up against them, outside of, you saw Braun Strowman and Chad Gable getting destroyed by them. But certainly just what they're doing, no one really seems to I can't think of anybody who would have chemistry with this group until I see it's presented at this point. Do they take off their masks when they're in the ring? Do we recognize them as real people? Do we recognize them as supernatural? Do we recognize them as murderers? All of that remains to be seen. And I think at this point, I'm curious to know what the follow-up is going to be, but perhaps it might be better for them to stay off television maybe for a little bit, even though they created some buzz here. You can revisit some of that stuff again, do some more teases of it. But, I'm struggling to even imagine or come up with what the next stop is for them, unless it's again somebody's in the ring, lights go out or so, and then they lay them out, and you try to lead to a match there. I think but I don't know if that's even the right direction for them.
Yeah, this is not the last time we'll be talking about this. I'm sure this will come up quite frequently over the next few months. John's second topic is the follow-up to CM Punk costing Drew McIntyre, and whether or not Drew's revenge was sufficient. John argues that Punk versus Drew doesn't need the title anyway, but he thought that the finish of the match was embarrassing in Scotland. I agree. I did not like the finish to that match. In fact, I made the argument on the 12-minute hot take this past week with Wade that Punk is certainly getting more heelish and Drew more babyface-ish, or coming across that way in this feud. John said, personally, I like to follow up on SmackDown of Drew's off-screen beatdown of Punk, but I didn't love it. Mainly because we only recently saw Braun Breaker send Ricochet to the hospital, and Ricochet didn't really do anything to Braun, whereas Punk went out of his way to ruin one of the best moments in Drew's life in his home country, a year after he already experienced those same feelings at Clash at the Castle. Plus, I feel like Punk's whole explanation for his actions revolving around Drew praying he got injured months earlier just made Punk seem even more petty, especially since this is the third time he's cost Drew a shot at winning the title, and Drew hadn't even mentioned Punk in the weeks leading up to Clash at the Castle. This isn't even considering the real-life aspect of Drew wanting to win for his wife, but given WWE acknowledges social media, this information about Drew's wife was public, just like the video released of Punk putting on the referee shirt. I'm also wondering if WWE considers this as Drew being heinous and assaulting Punk, or whether the story will be that Punk had it coming and this will lead to an official double turn. Because I believe that even now, WWE probably still views Punk as a babyface, even though he keeps ducking Drew and screwing him at every opportunity and causing him serious mental health issues because Drew once prayed Punk got injured and made a t-shirt about it months ago. Besides this, Drew saying Punk is brittle isn't that unfair considering Punk's recent history, so maybe Punk the character should put more of his energies into getting healthy again rather than obsessing over making Drew's life a living hell. Just a suggestion. Question: what did you think of the Drew Punk angle on SmackDown, and which of the two is most sympathetic in your view? And if WWE is intentionally booking Punk based on his real life reputation, is this the best story they could be telling? This is also, we had a comment as well about CM Punk and whether or not he's going to wrestle again. I feel like this question is a little leading. But I think I know
old toxic Phil.
I think I know his personal opinions about CM Punk based on this question. Just getting a hint, but I do think he'll wrestle again. But I do think there's validity to the idea that intentionally or not, Drew McIntyre is coming across as more of the babyface at this point in this feud. If it's not intentional, it's really bad booking. If it is intentional, then it's like 3 steps ahead of us, I guess, kind of booking. But I mean, I thought the beatdown was really well done on Friday. I thought it made sense for Drew. He bloodied up CM Punk, which is still not something you see often on WWE TV. So I think that makes it, takes it to a different level than what Braun Breaker did to Ricochet, is having that blood. So I liked it. But, WWE thinks got to be careful unless they're in Chicago where Punk's going to be given a hero's welcome. You might see crowds turning in favor of Drew McIntyre here.
I think that's what they're aware of, is that, Drew does seem more sympathetic. I think that the ending of Clash at the Castle definitely was a mistake, and hopefully they're able to recover from that. But you go back to SmackDown, which is in Chicago, home of CM Punk. That's where he's going to get the best reaction out of anywhere. And then you have Drew McIntyre, carry him out there, leave out a bloody CM Punk, and they think that that's enough to turn the tide again to making Drew McIntyre seem like the heel. And I think in Chicago that works. But is that going to work in other arenas? I think that still very much remains to be seen. But there's just there is so many questions about CM Punk. I mean, he looked like he was in tremendous shape. That he's been hitting it hard in the gym. He looks big. He looks very physical. But there's going to be a lot of questions as to how much you can get out of him, because he has had a history since coming back here that it just seems that anything can happen with him, where then he'll be out for an extended amount of time, where he cannot be relied upon to be a main fixture on the show, outside of his talking and his personality. That once he gets back into the ring, which is much needed at this point with how much talking and interference he's done with Drew McIntyre, that they're at the point where they need to have the match. We were supposed to get some resolution, as to whether he's been cleared, and obviously with him being laid out by Drew McIntyre, that buys them some time here, whether or not he's able to go at SummerSlam, which I believe is the penciled in idea of them going against each other there. But if that doesn't work, with Punk's recovery time, they now he's been beaten down, so they can delay that to another point. But I think WWE is conscientious of the criticisms that people have said at the finish of Clash at the Castle, the way that CM Punk has come off in this feud recently, that I don't think that this is a well thought out plan to get to do a double turn of both of these guys. That you're even seeing that the overlap between CM Punk and Paul Heyman, that it makes you wonder that, maybe is Paul Heyman going to be stepping into to help facilitate any of these storylines with Punk moving forward. That's on my part. That's just speculation based on the promo that they had with each other and the embrace of each other, and Heyman saying that they are not to lay hands on to CM Punk, that maybe we will see Paul Heyman be more involved in that front, which then would give a lot more flexibility to what you can do with Punk moving forward. And I think that it would be definitely a lot more curated and thought about, that storyline direction based on what we've seen with the Bloodline.
And last question from John is about booking based on wrestler hometowns. Alba Fire and Isla Dawn won the women's tag team titles in Scotland despite Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill starting to build momentum. He said he's very happy for Fire and Dawn, but unsure whether it's a good thing to deviate from your plans based solely on where your PLE is being held and a wrestler's parent dying, if that is indeed the reason why they switched the titles. Alba Fire's mother passed away recently. John says maybe they were going to win anyway and have a plan in mind. He's open to that possibility, but it's not like they were really built up before winning the championship, and they seem to do a complete 180. Question, ultimately, what were your thoughts on changing the cadence of booking based on whenever wrestlers are fighting in their hometowns? Generally speaking, I prefer this method of doing it rather than Vince McMahon's, which was humiliate wrestlers in their hometowns, which never really made sense to me, but fit with Vince's sense of humor. But that being said, I also don't think that you should be interrupting, months of effort that you put into booking just because you want to put someone over in their hometown. Piper Niven lost, Drew McIntyre lost. So it's not like these people are all going over in their hometown. And I was surprised that Isla Dawn and Alba Fire won for the reasons John said. Bianca and Jade had momentum as a team. I thought they were doing really well. And this kind of blunts that. So it's definitely a case-by-case situation, Joel. I don't think, just because someone's hometown is coming up that you should take a guy who's on the undercard and put him in a title match. I'm not sure that really helps anybody, but there are ways you can book it to where, if you have, for example, like they knew that they were having Clash at the Castle in Scotland. Why couldn't they have taken the previous 2 months to build up Isla Dawn and Alba Fire into potential challengers that really felt like they had a chance to win this match? Instead, they came out of nowhere and won, which I guess there's some value in that, but I would have preferred to see them take the long form approach to that. So what's your general rule or rules on booking wrestlers in their hometowns, home cities, home countries?
Yeah, it is a difficult thing because we see this in both companies. If we tie in AEW to this as well, whereas you see the examples of, like, you don't see Jake Hager ever on television, but then when they're in Oklahoma, they bring him out there and have him be a part of an angle, and then he also gets a match on there, and it's like, wait, what? We don't see Jake Hager ever, and now here he is running out, and he gets a full match on the show. So those things are a little bit head scratching to me, that I think that you want to you can still make those fans happy. Certainly, I'm never in favor of the embarrassment of them. If you want to cut an angle like you did with CM Punk, and you first of all gave the fans, their happy moment, he celebrates, he gets out there, you get to hear the music, et cetera, et cetera. And then you want to cut an angle with him later because you're trying to really get that over, because people care deeply about that character. That's one thing. But, we think about, also going back to Oklahoma, Jim Ross and the treatment of him back under the Vince McMahon regime, of how it was about humiliating people and not playing into what the audiences wanted for that. But I don't think that you should go such in a direction that you should, just give something for fans to make them happy in that instance. Like, for example, if they were having some event in Minnesota and the Twin Cities, and then all of a sudden you just had Chad Gable in a huge match winning this, and it was out of nowhere to win a big match. Sure, that would maybe be good for good for seeing that live in the arena, but does it make sense for that storyline? And you definitely want it to make sense in the storyline and not just kind of derail something, the momentum that Bianca and Jade Cargill already had, just because you're trying to offset another disappointment from being in the home country. So it's a complicated thing. I don't think that there's a black and white rule for it, but I just don't think that you should ever humiliate somebody for the sake of humiliating them in their home place. I just don't think that benefits anyone, and it puts a bad taste into the crowd's mouth for doing that. And then B, I just don't think that you should derail a storyline completely just to make the crowd happy.
Last question is from the chat. We had Jacob Fatu debuting, the long-awaited debut on SmackDown this past week, and there's a comment that the other members of the new bloodline sort of shot Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu a look there, Tonga Loa and Tama Tonga. And what was that about? Hopefully not already trying to sow seeds of dissension within the bloodline. I think it was probably more surprise. Maybe they didn't realize that Solo Sikoa had this Jacob Fatu card up his sleeve that he was going to play. Certainly Jacob Fatu may make the others consider their own roles in the bloodline and where they now stand relative to this newcomer. Maybe they know something about Jacob Fatu as a character that we're going to have revealed over the next few weeks. But, certainly this is a big addition for the bloodline for WWE, because he is, a crown jewel of sorts of the bloodline in that, he's very good in the ring, even above and beyond what we've seen from guys like Sikoa and the others. So, just another added dimension to this new bloodline. They keep adding characters to it, and the bench gets deeper and deeper. So what did you think of how they debuted him and what this could mean for the bloodline next?
Yeah, I thought that he had a good debut. I mean, I'm never in favor of advertising a main event, just going 1-2 minutes and then going straight to the DQ, never a favor despite the promotion that is. But to have this guy lay out the top guy in the company right now, I mean, is huge. And it says a lot about what they think about him, putting him into the storyline, putting him into this role, that I think that they have really done an excellent job of bringing in Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, into the bloodline faction, and really trying to get something out of them other than, hey, these guys are also technically a part of the real life bloodline, and we're just going to add them in here. But they've made them into these dangerous type of characters. And certainly you got that impression with Jacob Fatu, who you mentioned, Greg. If you've seen his work in MLW or elsewhere, he's very good in the ring. He's going to be another excellent addition that he's more of kind of that wild card, wild character that maybe they can't control, who's not as cerebral as perhaps Tama Tonga and some of the other guys that they've added, and the evolution of the Solo Sikoa character, where he's taken upon that role of the alpha. And I would think that at some point that we will also see Hikuleo from New Japan making his debut with the bloodline as well. So that continues to expand. And I think it's been the most successful storyline for WWE, and they continue to stretch it out. And it certainly has a lot of legs. As long as you continue to evolve it and not just keep running back the same thing, but that they're able to bring back people who are legitimately related to them, who are legitimately bloodline members, and bring them in once their contracts are up. Feel like fresh new additions. You're seeing what they can get out of the Solo Sikoa character. What direction is now Paul Heyman going to go with this as things start to take another turn that's unsettling for him. Is he going to align himself more with CM Punk? A lot of that remains to be seen. But I think out of everything in WWE, that this is what continues to be the most interesting storyline, which has been to WWE's benefit and which has contributed to continued growth, despite maybe not everything on the card hitting on all cylinders.
Excellent. Joel, thank you so much for joining me this week. Before I let you go ahead and plug. I know you've got under your name there, you are the host of the All Elite Conversation Club. Go ahead and plug that, as well as anything else you want to plug here for the Torch.
Yeah, so I am, as Greg mentioned, and you can see here that I am the host of the All Elite Conversation Club. I host that show alongside Greg Canner, and we record those every Friday morning and get those released later on in that day, where we have a more in-depth conversation on Dynamite, going through all of those segments, getting really a lot of Greg's thoughts on that, and we go back and forth with our perspectives of watching wrestling, where we started watching wrestling in different eras. We got into the AEW at different points of it. And so it creates for a really fun dynamic of having two very different perspectives of things, who just want to see that company, be competitive, do well, but want to be fair about it and are not just overly positive or overly negative. That I think that we have a good balance and really take into consideration, what the audience is saying as well, and trying to incorporate that into our conversation club. So we encourage people to listen to that every Fridays, but also be a part of the conversation and send us your questions, comments, and you can send that to allelitecc@gmail.com.
Awesome. And as I put on the screen before, you search PW Torch in your podcast app of choice to subscribe to the PW Torch Daily Cast, including the All Elite Conversation Club and including Wrestling Night in America. Joel, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, appreciate it, Greg. Looking forward to doing it again.
Excellent. Sounds good. Joel Dehnel, everybody, just a couple more plugs to get in here. If you enjoyed the show, as I see a couple of people in the chat said, please like the show, comment, and subscribe to our channel. That helps us get noticed out there as well among all the shows on YouTube. And also, if you are not a member, subscribe to PW Torch VIP, gain access to Wade Keller's, all of his work, segment by segment analysis on TV shows, Wade Keller Hotline. pwtorch.com/govip is where you can go for that, as well as everything that you get with a VIP membership of the Torch, ad-free audio shows, all kinds of written work, the newsletter still available in physical form, sent right to your mailbox. I always love getting the hard copy. I know we get it online as VIP members, get the PDF version beforehand, but I always love waiting till I can get it in my hands and read it. There's still something I like about that. So pwtorch.com/govip is where you can go to sign up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, you can follow me on social media at Greg M. Parks. Check out my Parks' Take. I'm writing one a week on pwtorch.com. My last Parks' Take was on the TNA NXT relationship and one person from each company that could benefit from going to the other. And I'll have another one coming up this week. I have a couple 12-minute hot takes here on YouTube that we've done, Wade Keller and I, as well as I guessed on the flagship this past week as well. So I'm on summer break. I got a lot of time, so I'm filling a lot of needs right now. So doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of audio. So hope you'll check all of that and more out. And until then, I'll talk to you next week. Remember, we are going on the air after Forbidden Door, because if it's Sunday, it's Wrestling Night in America.